You ever have one of those days where the only thing keeping you sane is the promise of getting home and collapsing face first into your bed? That was me. 16 hours of legal jargon, endless client calls, and a mountain of paperwork that refused to shrink no matter how fast I worked. My office at Hawthorne and Bell felt less like a stepping stone to partner and more like a concrete box designed to slowly squeeze the life out of me. But I kept grinding. Because I believed in the work. Because I thought it would mean something. Because I thought someone was waiting for me at home, someone who appreciated the late nights, the sacrifices, the ambition. I was wrong. It was past midnight when I finally shut down my computer. The firm was quiet, the way it always was after 10. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional click of security cameras rotating on their mounts. I didn't bother checking my phone until I hit the elevator. 17 unread messages. I thumbed through them quickly. All from Nathan. Something about drinks with friends. Then a picture of him at some bar I didn't recognize, glass in hand, arm around Sloane, Harper, and Tara. I should have known then. I should have felt it. That tight pull in your gut that says something isn't right. But I didn't. I was too tired to read between the lines. Too trusting. Too married. The drive home was a blur of blinking traffic lights and empty streets. Westbridge always felt eerie at night, quiet, too clean, like it was hiding secrets in its alleys and gated communities. And I guess it was. My secrets. Or rather, Nathan's. I pulled into the driveway and noticed the first red flag. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree. Every room. Even the porch. And yet, there wasn't a sound. Nathan wasn't the silent type. He blasted music when he was drunk. He sang off-key. He made ridiculous late-night snack creations and insisted I try them, even when my brain was already halfway into REM sleep. But that night? Nothing. I stepped out of the car, the air unnaturally still, and that's when I saw them. 2 patrol cars parked just off the curb, lights flashing but sirens off. That red and blue reflection spun across my front lawn, painted itself across my car, my skin, my bones. I froze. At first, I thought maybe something had happened nearby. A break-in. A domestic call. But then one of the officers turned toward me. Hand on his belt. The look of recognition on his face hit me like a punch to the ribs. "Clara Bennett?" he asked. I hesitated, keys still in my hand. "Yes. Please step forward. Turn around. Hands where we can see them." I laughed. Not because I thought it was funny, but because what else do you do when the universe throws you into a scene from a movie you never auditioned for? "Excuse me?" I said, eyebrows raised. "I think there's some mistake. I'm an attorney. Turn around." Now, the second cop, taller, stockier, was already moving. I barely had time to process what was happening before cold steel snapped around my wrists. Real handcuffs. Tight. Unyielding. My breath hitched as panic punched through the fog of exhaustion. "What is this?" I asked, struggling to twist my head around. "What's going on?" "You're under arrest for fraud and identity theft," the officer replied. "You have the right to remain silent." No. Wait. This is a mistake. I'm a corporate lawyer. I've never who filed this. And then I heard it. Laughter. Not from the cops. From the porch. I turned my head just in time to see Nathan and his trio of sycophants, Sloane, Harper, and Tara, leaning against the railing, wine glasses in hand, giggling like teenagers who had just pulled off the ultimate senior prank. "Oh my God, Clara, you should see your face," Nathan howled, practically doubling over. "This is priceless." I stopped struggling. The officers were still reading me my rights, but I wasn't listening anymore. My eyes were locked on Nathan. His smile, his amusement, the complete and utter lack of concern on his face. "What the hell is this?" I asked, voice low, deadly calm. He wiped a tear from his eye, still chuckling. "It's just a prank, babe. Lighten up." "Yeah," Sloane chimed in, raising her glass. "You're always so serious, Clara. We thought you could use a little excitement." "Let's see if you can lawyer your way out of this one," Harper added, and I caught the faint glint of a phone recording. My mouth went dry. The officers weren't laughing. They weren't in on it. They were professionals, deadpan, and serious. And I saw it then, the manila folder one of them held, thick with printed pages. Bank statements. Emails. Forged. Someone had gone to a lot of trouble to make this look real. And it hit me. Nathan didn't just call the cops on a whim. He filed fake paperwork. He built a case. He committed a felony and convinced the people standing beside him to join in. My world tilted. "Nathan," I said, as they guided me toward the squad car. "Tell them it's a joke. Right now." He shrugged, still smiling. "Relax. I'll fix it in the morning. You'll be out before breakfast." He didn't get it. This wasn't a college prank. This wasn't some viral YouTube stunt. This was my life. My career. My freedom. The door slammed behind me. Metal against metal. I stared out the window as we pulled away, the lights of our once-perfect home fading behind me. Nathan was still smiling. I wasn't. Because unlike him, I understood exactly what he'd done. He hadn't just embarrassed me. He'd detonated a bomb at the center of everything I had built. And that was the moment, the exact second, Clara Bennett died. And someone else, someone smarter, colder, sharper, started to take her place. There's a sound that never really leaves you. The mechanical clank of a jail cell closing. It's not dramatic like in the movies, no echoing finality. It's dull, heavy, practical, and that's what makes it worse. Because that's when it hits you. You're not the exception. You're not special. You're just another name in the system. I sat on a hard bench, back pressed against a cold concrete wall in the women's holding cell of Westbridge County Detention. The air stank of bleach, sweat, and the kind of fear people pretend they're too proud to feel. I wasn't proud. I was processing, trying to make sense of what the hell had just happened. Fraud. Identity theft. The charges were absurd on their face. I'd spent years building a pristine legal record. I knew how serious those words were. That they weren't a prank. Not unless you were the kind of person who confused human lives with party games. Nathan had always had a childish streak. But this was something else. Something darker. I looked down at my hands, still red where the cuffs had bitten into my skin. I could still hear Nathan's voice, slurred with wine and laughter. "You'll be out before breakfast." He really believed that. Believed I'd wake up the next morning, brush it off, forgive him. Because that's who I used to be. Forgiving. Patient. Reasonable. But as I sat there, feet planted on sticky tile, I could feel that version of myself unraveling. Thread by thread. Across the room, a woman with a black eye and a bandaged wrist muttered nonsense under her breath, rocking side to side like she was stuck in a loop. Another, younger girl sniffled softly, hugging her knees. Neither looked at me. We were all ghosts to each other, too caught up in our own quiet collapses. I finally got my one phone call after what felt like a century. Of course I called him. Not because I believed he'd come running, but because I had to hear it. I had to give him a chance to say something, anything that would explain it all. Maybe it was a sick misunderstanding. Maybe the others had gone behind his back. Maybe he wasn't the monster my gut told me he was becoming. The line rang. Once. Twice. 4 times. Voicemail. "Hey, it's Nathan. Leave a message or don't." I probably won't listen. Beep. I hung up. No message. No second call. Just silence. I clenched the phone in my hand until my knuckles turned white. It wasn't the betrayal that broke me. Not entirely. It was the apathy. The laziness. The pure, unfiltered indifference. This wasn't rage. This wasn't revenge. This was him not caring if I burned. And that hurt more than any betrayal. Hours passed. Maybe more. No lawyer showed up. No apology. No explanation. I was starting to understand that there wouldn't be one. At some point, between watching a mouse scurry across the floor and counting the hairline cracks in the ceiling, I stopped waiting for someone to fix it. I stopped waiting for him. And that's when the switch flipped. You ever feel your soul recalibrate? Like your brain suddenly realizes the rules of your world have changed and starts redrawing the lines in real time? That was me. I had always believed in the power of truth, of logic, of law. But now? I realized something else mattered more than justice. Control. I didn't know it yet, but in that cell, with my name dragged through the mud and my wrists still stinging, I decided on something far more permanent than divorce. I decided I would never be vulnerable again. Eventually, my lawyer arrived. Valerie, one of the few people in my circle who wasn't either sleeping with Nathan or living off my paychecks. Her heels clicked furiously down the hallway before she even entered the room. When she saw me, her eyes flared with fury. "Clara," she exhaled, sitting beside me with a shake of her head. "What the hell is going on?" I didn't answer. I was too tired. "They told me you were arrested for identity theft. Do you have any idea how serious this is?" "I'm aware," I said quietly. "Did you see the report?" She opened a folder, jaw tightening as she flipped through the pages. There's a paper trail. Emails. Screenshots. Bank transfers. All fake. All under your name. Her voice trembled with disbelief. They forged an entire alternate financial record. This isn't a prank. This is premeditated character assassination. I leaned back. "I know." She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Clara, your husband orchestrated this. You understand that, right? This wasn't just a joke. He gave them motive. Fabricated evidence. Signed a goddamn sworn affidavit. He wanted this to stick." I nodded once. "I can press charges," she said carefully. "We can bury him. All of them. But it won't be pretty. It'll take time. And you'll be in the headlines for weeks. Is that what you want?" I thought about it. About dragging his name through the courts. About sobbing on camera for some true crime podcast. About giving the world access to my pain. And I realized something. "No," I said. "That's not what I want." "Then what do you want?" she asked. I looked her dead in the eyes. "To disappear." She blinked. "You're serious?" "As a prison sentence." She was quiet for a moment. "Then, I know someone. Off the books." "If you're sure." "I'm sure." Valerie didn't argue. That's what I liked about her. She didn't pretend to understand. She just moved. Within 2 hours, I was out. No charges officially stuck. Valerie shredded the fake case like tissue paper in front of a judge who had the good sense to see through it. But the damage was already done. My firm had already heard the rumors. My face had already been booked, processed, logged into systems that didn't care whether you were guilty or not. I didn't go home. Instead, I walked the streets of Westbridge until the sky lightened to a dusty gray and the birds started chirping like nothing had changed. I stood on the sidewalk outside my old apartment, staring up at the windows, picturing him still asleep, still smug, still dreaming about how clever he was. I almost knocked on the door, almost screamed, almost dragged him down with every legal weapon I had. But I didn't, because vengeance in the moment is messy. And I didn't want messy. I wanted precision. I wanted permanence. So I turned, walked away, and didn't look back. I'd already died once that night. The next time I rose, it would be as someone entirely new. There's a difference between running away and disappearing. Running is frantic. It's messy. It's emotional. Disappearing? That's something else. Disappearing is deliberate. It's cold, calculated, surgical. And it begins not with a sprint, but with a plan. That morning after I walked away from my apartment, our apartment, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel angry anymore. That was the scariest part. The grief, the betrayal, the humiliation, they had all burned off in the holding cell like a fever. What was left was quiet. Focused. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted freedom. Real freedom. So I called a man named Dorian Shaw. I'd never met him before. Didn't need to. He came recommended by Valerie with 2 words, no questions. His number wasn't saved in any contact list, and I spoke to him through a burner phone I bought at a gas station just outside Westbridge. When he answered, his voice was as smooth as silk and twice as sharp. "You want to disappear," he said. It wasn't a question. "Completely?" "Yes," I replied. "Not just vanish. Erase." There was a pause on the line. A breath. Then, "We'll need 48 hours. Can you hold still that long? I could. And I did. I rented a motel room under a fake name, Lena Hart. Just long enough to prep the foundation. I sat on the edge of the bed, legs crossed, laptop balanced in my lap. I logged into everything: bank accounts, insurance, firm contacts, cloud storage. Then I started pulling the plug on my life. First, the money. I transferred everything into an offshore account that no one, not even Valerie, knew about. It was something I'd set up years ago, a silly little, in case of emergency, vault I never thought I'd use. Funny how foresight often feels like paranoia until it saves your life. Second, the identity. Dorian's people walked me through the technical parts: how to wipe my social media footprint, unlink personal data from databases, plant digital noise to confuse tracking software. My digital shadow went dark. I watched as the version of Clara Bennett that had once been all over LinkedIn, news articles, legal directories, vanished. Third, the name. Clara Bennett was dead. I chose a new name, Evelyn Hart. I'd always liked the sound of it, elegant, timeless, like someone with grace and power in equal measure. Someone no one would laugh at. Someone no one could handcuff without consequences. A new name needed a new life. A new story. I built a resume from scratch, believable but vague. Volunteer work in Europe. Freelance research for legal journals. Grad school retake. Gaps that made sense but were hard to prove. I planted records. Fabricated employment history. Paper trails so clean even I had to double-check to believe they weren't real. And then came the last part. Leaving. You'd think that would be the easy part, right? Just hop a train, a bus, a plane. But leaving a city you've spent your whole life building in, that's a kind of death. Every street corner holds a memory. Every intersection, a ghost. You don't just say goodbye to people. You say goodbye to who you are with them. I couldn't take anything obvious. No family heirlooms. No old photos. No letters. The past had weight, and weight slows you down. So I took only what I needed: a sleek, unassuming suitcase, a pair of worn-in heels that didn't click too loudly, 3 sharp black dresses that could pass for either a funeral or a job interview, and 1 small box with exactly 5 things. My bar exam results, a photo of my mother, the fountain pen she left me, my final paycheck from Hawthorne and Bell, and the burner phone with Dorian's contact. I stood in the motel bathroom that second night, staring at my reflection. It didn't even feel like mine anymore. My skin looked tired, but my eyes were different. Harder. Clearer. I picked up a pair of scissors and started cutting. Not a full makeover. This wasn't a teen drama, but just enough to change the shape of me. I let my hair fall to my shoulders in jagged layers. Applied light makeup with a colder palette. Dressed not like Clara the wife or Clara the lawyer, but Evelyn the enigma. And then I left. No note. No goodbye. I took a one-way flight to Linden City, a place no one would associate with me. Not too flashy. Not too obscure. Big enough to disappear in, small enough to build something from the ground up. It wasn't until the plane took off, until the lights of Westbridge became little more than pinpricks in the distance, that I finally let myself feel something. Not sadness. Not even closure. Just breath. Real, full breath. The kind I hadn't taken in years. The kind you can only take when no one is watching. When you belong to no one. I had no plan beyond arrival. No job. No address. Just resources and silence. But that was enough. Because the most dangerous thing about losing everything is realizing what you're capable of without it. Linden City was colder than I expected. Gray buildings, clean streets, polite strangers who didn't ask questions. I walked through the city with purpose, like I'd lived there all my life. That's the key to starting over. Move like you belong. I found a furnished studio with month-to-month rent and no background check. Paid 6 months in advance. I signed the lease as Evelyn Hart, handed over my forged ID, and smiled when the leasing agent commented on how elegant my name sounded. I built a quiet routine. Coffee at the same corner cafe every morning. Morning runs before the city woke up. Visits to the courthouse, purely as an observer, just to feel close to who I used to be. People forget that disappearing isn't just about hiding from others. It's about finding out who you are without them. And for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't Clara the wife. Clara the workhorse. Clara the good girl. I was Evelyn. And Evelyn wasn't interested in being liked. She was interested in becoming something untouchable. Of course, Nathan didn't notice I was gone right away. I imagined his morning routine, hungover, smug, waiting for the inevitable explosion of drama he assumed I would bring. But what he got instead was silence. No calls. No confrontation. Just nothing. That must have driven him insane. I like to think he tried to track me down. Called the firm. Maybe even tried to file a follow-up complaint, only to find the charges mysteriously dropped and the victim vanished. I picture him pacing, trying to keep up the act for his friends as they slowly peeled away, realizing the woman he mocked was no longer his to mock. I didn't leave breadcrumbs. I didn't give him a mystery to solve, because mysteries imply hope. And I didn't want him to hope. I wanted him to doubt. Every memory, every assumption, every belief that I would always be there, always forgive, always pick up the pieces. The version of me he betrayed didn't exist anymore. In her place was someone else. And the world hadn't met her yet. But it would. Funny thing about arrogance, it only works when there's an audience. Nathan thought the world revolved around him, but what he didn't realize was how much of his orbit had always been mine. His lifestyle, his status, his circle, it was all borrowed light, and I was the sun. So when I disappeared, when I cut the cord without warning or spectacle, he didn't crash immediately. No, first he floated. Deluded. Confident. A king with no kingdom, parading around the ruins like the crown still mattered. But that's the thing about ruins, they whisper. They whisper that something was once beautiful. And now? Now it's gone. I wasn't there to witness it. I didn't need to be. I had contacts. Eyes. Whispers that reached me even in my quiet corner of Linden City. People talked, and when they did, they talked to people I paid. The first thing he lost was me, but he didn't notice that right away. What he noticed was the silence. I know how Nathan's mind works. He expected a tantrum, a storm, divorce papers thrown at his feet. He would have welcomed that, played the victim, claimed it was all a misunderstanding. We were drinking. It was a joke. He probably practiced the apology in the mirror, practiced the tears. But when no fight came, when no response arrived, something in him shifted. Because silence? Silence is power. It forces people to sit with themselves. And Nathan had never done that before. He waited. Day 1, day 2, maybe even a week. But the texts he sent went unanswered. The calls rang and rang and rang. The locks on the apartment hadn't changed, but the space inside had. My things were gone. My scent. My energy. And then came the second loss. The firm. Hawthorne and Bell may not have known the whole story, but they knew enough. Word spreads fast in legal circles, especially when police are involved. I hadn't filed a formal complaint. I hadn't exposed the extent of what he did. But my sudden absence paired with the rumors left questions Nathan couldn't answer. When he walked into the office without me, it was like a magician showing up without their rabbit. All performance, no substance. He tried to play it cool. She's just blowing off steam, he told them. Little lovers spat, he said. But you can only lie to professionals for so long before they start fact-checking. He wasn't a partner. He wasn't even senior counsel. He was a +1 who used my reputation like a credit card. And once the card was declined, they stopped taking his calls. I heard he was quietly let go a month later. Not with a bang, not with some dramatic scene. Just a simple email. Thank you for your time. Your services are no longer required. No one fought for him. No one asked questions. That was the beginning. Next came the apartment. He tried to hold on to it, our sleek, 2-bedroom high-rise in the heart of Westbridge. Floor-to-ceiling windows, imported marble countertops, the balcony view he used to brag about. But those kinds of places require money. Real money. And Nathan had never been good with numbers. Not unless someone else was balancing the books. The accounts were already frozen. The cards canceled. Every financial tether we'd once shared? Snipped clean by my own hand the morning I left. He applied for loans. Short-term credit. Asked friends to float him, just until Clara comes around. But Clara wasn't coming around. Clara didn't exist anymore. Within 3 months, he was evicted. Not because he ran out of charm. Because charm doesn't pay rent. He moved in with a friend, Tara's boyfriend, if the whispers were right. But that, too, didn't last. Because house guests only stay welcome when they add value, and Nathan was running a deficit in every department. By the time he landed in a studio apartment on the east side, the kind with peeling paint and shared laundry machines, his ego had started to rot. He still tried to salvage it, of course, hit the bars, post old vacation pics, drop my name like it still meant something. But people weren't buying. Because here's the truth, people love a golden boy, but they adore watching him fall. And Nathan? He gave them a front row seat. I didn't lift a finger. Didn't make a call. Didn't publish a single article or threaten to expose him. All I did was vanish. And he unraveled all on his own. The social fallout came next. He had always been the center of the party, but without me, the invites stopped. Because the truth was, those dinner parties, those charity events, those networking galas, they were mine. My clients. My contacts. My stage. He tried to re-enter the scene, showed up at events alone, clinging to a glass of wine like it was a lifeline. But the smiles grew tighter. The nods became dismissive. And the whispers behind his back? Deafening. He's not with Clara anymore? What happened? I heard she pressed charges. Wait, no? She just vanished. That's weird, right? In high society, suspicion is a stain. And Nathan? He was soaked in it. I got a message one day. From Sloan, of all people. Hey, not sure where you are, but... Nathan's spiraling. Maybe just call him? I didn't respond. But I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I was tempted. Because it was funny. Funny how they'd turned on him the second I was no longer part of the equation. Funny how easily the crowd that once worshipped him forgot his name. I wasn't surprised. I had always known that Nathan's power was performative. That his confidence was costume deep. But watching the performance end, watching the audience leave while he stood on stage, confused, spotlight dimming, well, that was something else entirely. I think the worst part for him wasn't the money or the job or the apartment. It was the irrelevance. Nathan thrived on being important. But now? He couldn't even get his own story straight. Because how do you explain being abandoned by your wife with no note, no lawsuit, no drama? How do you spin a silence you don't understand? You don't. You start to doubt yourself. You start to panic. You start to wonder, what did I really lose? And if you're smart, eventually you realize the answer. Everything. There are 2 kinds of rebirth. The first kind is poetic, emotional, hopeful, the stuff of self-help books and sunrise yoga retreats. The second kind is quiet, cold, strategic. A rebirth that requires sacrifice, not sentiment. Guess which one I chose. By the time I arrived in Linden City, I wasn't Clara Bennett anymore. I had stripped her name from every bank account, every data registry, every professional ledger that once defined her. She had been a good soldier, dutiful, ambitious, endlessly forgiving. But that woman was gone. Buried somewhere between the holding cell and the walk away from Westbridge. What remained was Evelyn Hart. You should understand something. I didn't become Evelyn to hide. I became Evelyn to evolve. I didn't just want to disappear from my old life. I wanted to build a new one that would render the past meaningless. Not in the emotional sense. I wasn't looking for closure. Closure is a story people tell themselves when they're afraid of truth. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was finished. I rented a small studio in a part of the city where no one asked questions. Brick walls, rusting fire escapes, the kind of neighborhood that never made the news. I bought my groceries at the local bodega and paid in cash. No paper trail. No lingering scent of who I used to be. And I worked. Not in a law firm. Not yet. That would have been reckless. My name, my real name, was still too fresh, too traceable. Instead, I spent my days in the back corner of a law library, scanning pages and building a portfolio under the pseudonym. I reviewed obscure judicial opinions, edited technical articles, ghost-wrote white papers for legal professors who couldn't be bothered. I studied people, too. The way they moved. The way they dressed. The way power slid off their shoulders like silk or suffocated them like a noose. I cataloged it all. Because my return to the legal world wouldn't be a comeback. It would be a debut. The new version of me had to be untraceable, not just in records, but in presence. Clara was polite. Evelyn? She was precise. Clara asked questions. Evelyn offered answers before anyone realized there was a question to begin with. I reinvented my voice, my posture, my walk. I changed my wardrobe, not drastically, just enough to erase familiarity. Structured blazers. Monochrome palettes. No jewelry except for one delicate gold bracelet with no inscription. No fingerprints from the past. Every morning, I walked to a cafe on the corner of 5th and Garland. Same time, same drink, same seat. Routine was power. It created predictability while I stayed unpredictable. That cafe became my planning table. I would sit by the window with a plain black notebook and sketch out the architecture of the future. Not revenge. Not yet. Reinvention. I started applying for small contracts under my new name, legal consulting, document drafting, procedural audits. Nothing glamorous. But every job was flawless. Every client satisfied. Every invoice paid in full. And slowly, my name, Evelyn Hart, began to mean something. One morning, I received a call from a woman named Camille Arden, a mid-tier legal firm partner with a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency. She had heard of me through a quiet referral. Needed help preparing a litigation summary. I agreed. Delivered it 2 days early. She called back asking if I'd consider something more permanent. I didn't say yes right away. That would have looked desperate. Instead, I asked for a meeting. Camille wore navy suits and rarely smiled. She sized people up in 5 seconds and dismissed most of them in 6. But she liked me. Or rather, she liked Evelyn. The crisp handshake, the tight resume, the careful silences that made her lean in when I finally did speak. "Where'd you come from?" she asked, sipping bitter espresso in her office. "Small firm work," I replied. "Freelance mostly. I wanted something more structured." "You're overqualified for an associate role." "I'm not interested in titles," I said. She smiled then. The smallest curve of her mouth. Approval. I got the job. And just like that, Evelyn Hart stepped into the legal world with both heels planted. Camille's firm was no Hawthorne and Bell. It was leaner, scrappier. The kind of place where results mattered more than pedigree. Perfect. No one there cared about where I had been. Only where I could take them. I buried myself in work. Case research, depositions, litigation strategy. I kept a low profile, but my output was undeniable. Clients requested me. Partners deferred to me. My hours were brutal, but I didn't mind. Clara had worked to prove herself. Evelyn worked to shape herself. And then came the day that told me I was ready. Camille knocked on my office door just past 7 p.m., holding 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. That was her version of celebration. We weren't friends, we were soldiers on the same battlefield. But she respected me. That meant something. "I want to put your name forward for the judge's fellowship," she said, pouring the wine. "It's not guaranteed. Hell, it's barely possible. But if anyone could pull it off, it's you." I looked at the glass in my hand. It caught the light just right. Clean. Full. Steady. "Thank you," I said. Not like I'd won something. Like I'd earned it. A few months later, I was standing in a courtroom, not as counsel, but as a judicial fellow. Temporary, yes. But visible. Respected. Trusted. It was quiet power. The kind that didn't need to announce itself. I wore the robes for the first time during a summary judgment review. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't tremble. No one doubted me. No one whispered behind my back. Because no one knew. No one saw Clara Bennett in Evelyn Hart. And I didn't either. I had become the woman I was always meant to be, Not the accommodating wife, not the overachieving assistant, not the smile-pasted perfectionist who thought that love was earned through sacrifice. I didn't need love anymore. I needed sovereignty. And I had it. The idea of revenge didn't come like thunder. It came quietly, like fog rolling in over the sea. I didn't rush it. I didn't obsess. I simply let time sharpen me. Because here's the truth about transformation. The people who destroyed you expect your pain to be loud. They expect explosions, screaming, public breakdowns. They don't expect silence. They don't expect elevation. They don't expect to turn on the television one day and see your name in a courtroom transcript, sitting behind the bench, with all the authority they once laughed at you for lacking. They don't expect that the woman they broke will rise again. And when she does, they won't recognize her. But she'll recognize them. And she'll be ready. There are 1,000 ways to confront someone who tried to ruin you. You can scream. You can fight. You can drag their name through the mud, throw fists, throw lawsuits, throw fire. But all of that is noise. And if there's one thing I learned since Clara Bennett died, it's this. The most deafening revenge is silence, until it's time to speak. And when I finally chose to speak, I didn't send a message. I sent an invitation. It was elegant, understated, cream paper embossed in gold, heavy in the hand, thicker than it needed to be, just enough to feel like a luxury. The front bore a single phrase in serif font, the Blackridge Legal Honors Gala. Beneath it, in smaller print, honoring the advancement of justice, excellence, and leadership in the field of law. Inside, nestled in an envelope lined with midnight blue, was his name, Mr. Nathan Rhodes. The guest of a guest. +1 to an open RSVP. No direct acknowledgement. Just enough formality to catch his eye. Just enough vagueness to pique his curiosity. And in the signature block, right above the RSVP line, my new name, Judge Evelyn Hart. I knew he'd open it. Even now, after everything, Nathan couldn't resist the idea of a red carpet legal event. He lived for the spotlight. And this invitation, it would feel like validation. A sign that his exile from high society was finally over. That the doors he once stumbled through were cracking open again. I could almost see the moment in my mind. Him flipping the envelope over, scanning the sender address. Him narrowing his eyes at the unfamiliar name. Hart. Evelyn Hart. Where had he heard it before? He wouldn't make the connection. Not yet. But he would come. They always do. The night of the gala, I arrived early. Not because I needed to. Because I wanted to watch the room shift around me. The venue was a converted opera house, marble floors, sweeping staircases, chandeliers that dripped light like icicles. Tables dressed in black silk, flanked by the kind of lawyers who wore their egos as cufflinks. I took my seat at the center table, nodding to the names I now moved among. Judges, senior partners, legal scholars. None of them knew the woman I used to be. They saw the robes, the resume, the poise. They saw Evelyn Hart, not Clara Bennett. And that was exactly the point. By the time the crowd settled and the string quartet softened to silence, I felt the air change. He had arrived. I didn't need to turn around. I knew. I could feel the static in the room, the flicker of confusion, the whispers starting at one end of a table and rippling out like shockwaves in still water. Nathan never knew how to enter quietly. He walked in with the same swagger he always had, shoulders back, smile too wide, suit tailored just enough to suggest effort, but not enough to hide the wear. He looked better than I expected. Desperation hadn't aged him, not physically. But there was something different about his posture. Not broken. Not yet. Just unsure. He scanned the room, searching. And then he saw me. I made sure of it. I was already standing by the bar, drink in hand, posture effortless. I met his eyes for the briefest second. A flicker. Just enough. I watched his expression tighten. A puzzle half solved. He tilted his head, brows furrowing. Evelyn Hart. There was recognition there, but not clarity. Not yet. He turned to his date. Harper, of course. Still clinging to whatever social capital hadn't rotted from the inside. Her dress was designer, second-hand, likely, and her laugh too loud. She hadn't changed. I let them stew in it. Because that's the art of a good trap. You don't slam it shut. You let them walk into it themselves. The host took the stage as the last of the entrees were cleared. The room dimmed to soft candlelight. Wine glasses glinted. Laughter faded. Ladies and gentlemen, the host began, his voice smooth and clear. Tonight we gather to celebrate not only legal excellence, but resilience, integrity, leadership. Nathan wasn't listening. He was still watching me. I didn't look back. Every year, the host continued, we honor one individual whose journey has redefined what it means to serve the law. Someone who has turned betrayal into purpose, silence into strength. That was when I felt the shift. The realization. Because I wasn't just any honoree. I was the honoree. And now, the host said, lifting his hand toward the stage, please welcome one of the most formidable minds in the judiciary, a woman whose rise through adversity has become legend in our field. Judge Evelyn Hart. I rose. The applause was thunderous. And Nathan? He went still. Because in that moment, he knew. The name. The voice, the eyes, it all clicked. The woman he'd once humiliated was no longer some fragile, forgotten mistake. She was a judge. And she was standing on stage in front of 500 people, being applauded for her resilience. I walked to the microphone with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Not because I was hiding something. Because I wanted him to see. Thank you, I began, letting my voice carry with calm, precise weight. It's an honor to be here tonight. But if I'm being honest, I didn't always believe I'd make it to this kind of room. The crowd listened, rapt. I didn't need notes. I wasn't always a judge. I wasn't always someone people listened to. Once, not so long ago, I was someone who trusted the wrong people. Someone who was betrayed. Humiliated. Publicly. Cruelly. I let that hang. I didn't look at Nathan. I didn't need to. But betrayal, I continued, is not the end. It's a beginning. A chance to become something else. Not in spite of what happened to you, but because of it. Another pause. I scanned the crowd, my gaze sweeping over faces both unfamiliar and familiar, resting briefly, coldly, on the man who once called me wife. They tried to destroy me, I said softly. And in doing so, they freed me. No name. No need. I stepped back. Let the applause carry me off stage. Nathan didn't clap. He didn't move. He sat there rigid, his date whispering something he couldn't hear. His hands clenched around his napkin. His jaw tight. He had just become the unnamed villain in the origin story of a woman the entire room now revered. And no one even knew his name. Not yet. But that wasn't the end. Because this wasn't just a speech. It was an opening act. The thing about people like Sloane, Harper, and Tara is they never thought they'd have to pay. Not really. In their world, cruelty was currency. Mockery was a bonding ritual. They could sip wine on a porch and watch a woman be arrested for a crime she didn't commit, laughing like it was stand-up comedy, and wake up the next morning thinking they were still good people. They believed I was gone. Broken. Too humiliated to return. Too small to fight back. They were wrong. I didn't want justice. I wanted a mirror. I wanted each of them to see exactly who they were, unfiltered, exposed, discarded. I wanted their worlds to unravel not with a bang, but with a series of precise incisions. And that's exactly what I gave them. Step 1. Sloane Whitmore's fall from power. Sloane always played Queen Bee. CEO of Whitmore Innovations, darling of the local business press, a woman who wore success like perfume. She made everything look effortless, until you looked a little closer. I started with a whisper. A quiet email to an anonymous blogger who specialized in financial sleight of hand. A few breadcrumbs, nothing damning, not yet. Just enough to spark curiosity. Because Sloane had secrets. The kind of secrets that don't survive daylight. Embezzlement disguised as consulting fees. Personal expenses buried in expense reports. Investor funds quietly rerouted through shell companies. It wasn't hard to find once I knew where to look. And I knew exactly where to look. Each leak was timed, like water torture. First, a questionable invoice. Then, a leaked memo. Then, a recorded call she never realized had been saved. I let it build like pressure behind a dam. And when the dam broke, it wasn't me who pulled the trigger. It was her board. They called an emergency vote behind closed doors. I wasn't there, but I heard she didn't even fight. Just sat there, stunned, as the people she thought she owned read from a list of improprieties. No emotion. Just business. She was escorted out the same way I was escorted to jail, quietly, but with the whole world watching. The next day, her face was on the cover of the Ledger, captioned, "Whitmore ousted amid scandal." No one mentioned the arrest she laughed at. But I did. I sent her a single envelope. Inside? A printed screenshot of her laughing on the porch that night. Her mouth wide open. My wrists cuffed in the background. There was no note. Just the image. Let her fill in the silence herself. Step 2. Harper Lane's social collapse. Harper was the influencer. The sparkle filter queen. Every post was perfectly curated, lavish vacations, relationship goals, inspirational captions layered over sunset photos. She turned her life into a brand. But brands break. Especially when they're built on lies. She was engaged to Mason Beckett, the clean-cut heir to a family fortune, someone who genuinely adored her. He was loyal, earnest, the type of man who believed love made people better. Poor Mason. He had no idea Harper had been sleeping with his best friend, Jason, from their university days. It was casual, convenient, and, in her words during one particularly careless voice memo to Tara, too good to give up just because I'm bored. That memo was the first thing I intercepted. I waited. I followed their patterns, Harper's content calendar, Mason's business trips, Jason's gym schedule. I didn't need to shout the truth. I just needed to place it. One evening, Mason came home early. Jason was already there. The moment was choreographed down to the minute, a text I sent from a spoofed number, luring Harper upstairs while Jason was in the kitchen. Mason walked in just in time to hear her whisper, "He won't be home until 9. Timing is everything. From what I heard, he didn't yell. He just left. Packed his bags and never answered another one of her calls. He wiped her from his life so fast her head spun. But the internet? The internet never forgets. When the breakup hit her page, her followers begged for answers. Her silence only made them hungrier. The cheating leaked in bits and pieces, DM screenshots, old photos, a voice memo posted anonymously by a friend of the groom. Her sponsors dropped her within a week. Brands love drama until they're the ones paying for it. Harper went from 200,000 followers to public silence in less than a month. The apology video she posted, titled, "Addressing the Rumors," was eaten alive. Comments turned brutal. She disabled them. Then turned off the video. Then disabled her account entirely. And me? I sent her one message. An Instagram DM from a throwaway account. "Let's see if you can influence your way out of this one." She never responded. She knew exactly who it was from. Step 3. Tara Langford's quiet ruin. Tara was never as loud as the others. She was the whisperer. The one who smiled sweetly while sharpening the knife under the table. She liked control. Liked order. She married early Brian, a real estate developer with too much ambition and not enough self-awareness. They had a lovely home. Lovely children. Lovely masks. But Tara had a past. A sealed adoption record from when she was 19. A son she never told Brian about. A detail scrubbed from every bio, every conversation. She built her new life on the assumption that no one would ever dig that deep. Unfortunately for her, I had shovels. I found him Elias. He was 21. Studying psychology at a state college a few hours away. He wasn't angry. He wasn't looking for vengeance. He just wanted to know who he came from. And so I gave him a nudge. An envelope arrived at his dorm, copies of the birth certificate, adoption agency paperwork, a letter with no signature that simply said, "She remembers you." He found her on Facebook. Her name. Her photos. The image of the perfect family she'd built without him. And one afternoon, he knocked on her front door. I wasn't there, but I heard Brian opened it, and I heard Tara fainted. The fallout was quiet but total. Her marriage splintered under the weight of withheld truth. Brian moved out within 2 weeks. The children, old enough to sense the unraveling, stopped trusting her. Elias never returned, and Tara's therapist appointments became bi-weekly. She lost what she valued most, the illusion of being untouchable. For her, I didn't send a message. I didn't need to. Her son's eyes were enough. The final touch. People often ask, why not go bigger? Why not sue them? Expose them? Because courtrooms don't always deliver justice. But life? Life does, if you know how to twist the blade just right. I never took credit. Not publicly. I left them space to doubt. To wonder if karma had finally come around. To ask each other, do you think she's back? And then pray the answer was no. But I did leave one last calling card. Each of them, Sloane, Harper, and Tara, received a plain white envelope one morning. No postage. Delivered by hand. Inside, just a single slip of paper. 3 words. Talk your way out of this. The same words Harper had laughed into my face the night they had me cuffed. The words that made me promise I'd never be weak again. I never got a reply. But I didn't need one. Their silence was loud enough. The perfect trap isn't loud. It doesn't snap shut like a bear trap with teeth and blood and screaming. No. The perfect trap is velvet-lined. Whisper quiet. It makes the target walk inside willingly, even gratefully. It makes them believe they've won something. That's the only way it really works. That's how I got Nathan. After everything, after the gala, after the speech, after the haunting silence that followed, he still didn't get it. He thought the speech was the end. That I'd finally said my piece. That it was some big, dramatic flourish to close the chapter. He had no idea the chapter hadn't even started. You see, when men like Nathan lose status, they don't look inward. They don't reflect. They scramble. They panic. They hunt for ladders. And when they spot one, they climb it, even if it's made of razors. So I built him a ladder. It began with a job listing. Executive assistant, confidential legal firm. Discretion required. High salary. Opportunities for advancement. The wording was deliberate. Tempting. Vague enough to hide its true nature, yet enticing enough to appeal to a man desperate to claw his way back into the world he believed owed him a seat. And it worked. Nathan applied under a pseudonym N. Rhodes. I smiled when I saw the name. He probably thought it sounded clever, like he was being cautious. But I recognized the resume immediately. The pattern of phrasing. The inflated experience. The desperate tone just beneath the polished words. He wanted back in. And I gave him an interview. We met in a rented conference room in a glass high-rise downtown. Not my usual office. This was part of the performance. The room was cold, minimalist. A long table, 2 chairs, a pitcher of water. No personal touches. No warmth. He walked in wearing the same expression he always did, shoulders squared, eyes scanning for power, trying to figure out who to charm. I was sitting at the head of the table in a navy suit, no robe, no title. Just Ms. Hart. He didn't recognize me. Not yet. Thank you for coming, I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. He sat, still trying to figure me out. I could see the flicker of something in his eyes, something familiar. A memory trying to surface. But I buried it under calm professionalism. We conducted the entire interview like we were strangers. He talked about work ethic, about redemption, about how everyone deserves a second chance. I asked him routine questions with a cool smile, taking notes I didn't need. At the end, I stood, extended my hand, and said, "You'll hear from us soon." He shook it, still not knowing. Still clueless. That was the beauty of it. The next day, his acceptance email arrived with a contract. He signed it within the hour. "Welcome to the team, Nathan. Your title? Executive Assistant to Senior Counsel. Your office? A windowless cubicle. Your boss? Me." He walked into the firm on his first day with his back straight and his chin high, wearing a cheap suit pretending to be tailored. I watched from the glass-walled corner office as the receptionist directed him to HR. He didn't look toward me. Still didn't know. But that wouldn't last. I made sure of it. The first week, I gave him basic tasks, scheduling, calendar management, compiling files. He stumbled, but not badly. He was eager to impress, always with a slightly forced smile, always a little too loud when introducing himself to others. The second week, I began the pressure. Meetings at 5 a.m. Unreasonable timelines. Tasks I knew were doomed from the start. Reschedule these 6 depositions by tomorrow without changing any of the other lawyers' calendars. Book a conference suite on 10 minutes notice in a courthouse that's been fully booked for 6 weeks. Reformat this 187-page brief, but keep the original font spacing, margins, and structure exactly the same. He tried. God, he tried. He stayed late. Came in early. I saw the bags grow under his eyes. Watched his hands tremble ever so slightly when he reached for his coffee. But I never raised my voice. Never once lost my temper. I treated him with perfect, polished professionalism. And that's what made it worse. Because he knew something was wrong, but he couldn't prove it. And there's nothing more terrifying than being tortured by someone who never breaks a rule. One morning, he came to my office, hesitating in the doorway. Yes, I said without looking up from my screen. Hi, I just wanted to ask, he began, swallowing. Am I doing something wrong? I looked up then, tilted my head ever so slightly. No, I said. You're performing to the letter of your contract. He nodded slowly. And I smiled. That was when I saw it. The recognition. It didn't come all at once, like a flash. It came in layers. A twitch of the brow. A subtle shift in posture. A question forming in the back of his mind. But he didn't ask. He just left. Because even if he had asked, "Are you Clara?" what could he have done with the answer? I was Judge Evelyn Hart. And he was an assistant. The weeks dragged on. I gave him just enough rope to keep climbing, presented him with tasks that dangled the idea of advancement, hinted at opportunity, teased the future. And every time he failed to deliver, because, of course, I made sure he would, I moved the goalpost. He began to unravel slowly. Sloppy emails. Missed deadlines. Rumors around the office. Nothing too serious. Just enough to make the team wonder if we'd made a mistake hiring him. Exactly what I wanted. One night, after everyone else had left, he knocked on my door. I knew what was coming. He looked like a man on the verge of collapse. Hair tousled. Shirt wrinkled. Tie loosened. That old, artificial confidence gone. What stood in front of me now was a shell. Please, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Please what? You know what, he whispered. I need you to stop. Stop what? I asked, voice even. You're punishing me. I don't know how, but you're making my life hell. I stood slowly, walked around the desk, and looked him straight in the eye. You're not being punished, I said calmly. You're being supervised. He blinked. Swallowed hard. You don't recognize me, do you? I asked. His lips parted, but no sound came. Westbridge, I said softly. A porch. Red and blue lights. Wine glasses. His breath caught. There it was. The full, horrifying realization crashing down on him like bricks. You, he said. Yes, I replied. Me. He took a step back. I didn't know. I didn't. You knew exactly what you were doing. You just didn't think I'd ever become someone you'd have to answer to. He opened his mouth. Closed it again. I was wrong, he whispered. I was stupid. I never meant for it to go that far. You thought I'd forgive you. Tears sprang to his eyes. I'm sorry, he said. I leaned in, close enough to see the pain carved into his face. And I whispered the same words I had once dreamed of saying. Not good enough. He left my office with hunched shoulders and heavy steps. And 2 weeks later, he walked in to find a sealed envelope on his desk. Termination letter. No warning. No explanation. Just one last reminder that he was no longer the one pulling strings. Because now I held every single one. There's a moment in every performance when the actor realizes the play is over. The applause fades. The lights dim. The curtain falls. And all that's left is silence. That was Nathan's moment the day he walked into the firm and found the envelope on his desk. Plain white. No name, no stamp, just the company letterhead tucked neatly at the top. Inside, a single-page termination notice. No thank you for your service. No best of luck. Just. Effective immediately, your position has been terminated. I didn't even sign it. I wanted him to wonder if I had typed it myself. I wanted him to ask who approved it. I wanted him to walk around the office, hoping someone would whisper it was her. But no one did. Because no one needed to. When he stepped into my office that morning, clutching the paper like it might still change its mind, I didn't look up from my screen. He stood there in silence, waiting for acknowledgement. He wouldn't get it. Is this because of, he began, voice thin. I clicked my pen once. The room buzzed with tension. You're no longer employed here, Mr. Rhodes, I said, still without looking at him. This office is for staff only. That was the last thing I ever said to him in a professional setting. He stood for a second longer. His pride was gone. His posture collapsed. He looked like someone who had been hollowed out from the inside. And then he left. No begging. No dramatic monologue. Just a man who finally understood that I wasn't playing. He was gone. And I thought I'd feel something. Pride. Satisfaction. Triumph. But I didn't. I felt quiet. I thought about that feeling for days after. The stillness. The absence of heat. Because for so long, my life had been driven by the flame of what he did to me. The humiliation, the betrayal, the police lights flickering across my face while he laughed on the porch. I'd held onto that fire like it was oxygen. But now? Now it was just smoke. What do you do when the war ends and you realize you've already won? At first, I tried to move forward, pretend the story was over. I refocused on my work. I handed down decisions with measured calm, moved through courtrooms with the poise of someone who belonged there. But the past doesn't always knock on the door when you're ready. Sometimes it waits for you in an alley. It was late March when I saw him again. I wasn't looking for him. I had just left a charity dinner downtown, tired of the forced conversations and clinking glasses. I slipped out the back entrance, heels clicking against wet pavement, eager for air that didn't smell like white wine and polished ego. And there he was, sitting on a bench near the bus stop, soaked, shivering, eyes glazed and unfocused. I almost didn't recognize him. The man who had once smirked his way through every room now looked like someone who had been left behind by time. His coat was too thin, the kind you only wear when you can't afford a new one. His shoes were scuffed and splitting. He looked up as I passed and flinched. It took a second. Then he realized who I was. He didn't jump up, didn't scramble to apologize. He just whispered something I didn't expect. You won. I froze. He didn't say it with bitterness. He didn't say it like someone angry or resentful or even surprised. He said it like someone who had accepted it. You destroyed me, he murmured. And I deserved it. His voice was hoarse, dry like paper. He let out a laugh, thin and empty. But what now, Clara? He asked, not caring that I went by Evelyn now. What do you do when the person you punished is already dead inside? That's what I remember most from that night. Not the rain, not his face. Just that question. What now? I walked away without answering. But the question clung to me. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. My bedroom was quiet, clean, untouched. The life I had built hummed around me. Orderly. Pristine. And yet I kept hearing his voice. What do you do when the person you punished is already dead inside? I don't know how long I wrestled with it. I told myself I had already done what needed to be done. That what came next was his problem, not mine. That I had already buried Clara once, and she didn't need a ghost in her new life. But closure is a tricky thing. Sometimes it wears a different mask than you expect. The next morning, I went back to that bench. He was still there. Same coat. Same posture. As if he hadn't moved. When he looked up and saw me, his eyes widened. You don't have to do this, he said quickly. If you came to gloat, just get it over with. I'm not here to gloat, I said. He blinked, confused. For the first time since this all began, I saw something raw in him. Fear. Not of me. Of what I might say next. So I asked him a question I never thought I would. What do you want, Nathan? He blinked again. What? I'm not asking what you deserve, I said. I'm asking what you want. He laughed, hollow, broken. What does it matter? It's not like I get to have things anymore. But I didn't let it slide. Answer the question. He looked down at his hands, then back at me. And in the quietest voice, he said, I just want to stop hurting. I didn't say anything right away. I just nodded, then reached into my coat, pulled out a plain envelope. I set it on the bench beside him. What is this? He asked, eyeing it like it might explode. A choice, I said. He opened it slowly. Inside, a one-way plane ticket. And a check. Enough to start over. Not luxury, not comfort, but a chance. Why? He whispered, staring at the check like it was poisoned. Because this isn't about what you deserve, I said. It's about what I need. He looked up at me, shocked, skeptical, and I said it. You don't deserve forgiveness, Nathan. But I deserve peace. And then I walked away. I didn't wait for gratitude. I didn't want it. This wasn't about him. It never had been. This was my final goodbye. Not to Nathan, but to the part of me that still needed to hold on to what he did. The moment I gave him that envelope, I let it go. The rage. The humiliation. The version of myself that believed I had to stay broken because he made me that way. I had taken everything from him. And now? I gave him back one thing. A sliver of agency. What he did with it, whether he rebuilt his life or drowned in it again, wasn't my responsibility. It never was. And walking away that day, I realized something else. True power doesn't come from revenge. It comes from release. They say letting go is a moment. But that's a lie. Letting go is a process. A slow unwinding. A steady releasing of the hand you once kept clenched around the pain, not because you wanted to, but because it was the only thing keeping you standing. That's what it was like after Nathan. After the envelope. After the final goodbye. I didn't feel lighter right away. I didn't wake up the next morning floating with peace or clarity or grace. I just woke up, tired. Tired in a different way. Not the exhaustion that comes from carrying grief or rage, but the kind that arrives after a long, hard journey. The kind that settles in your bones when the battle is finally over, not because you've lost, but because you've won so completely that there's no one left to fight. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to something. I wasn't planning my next move, or plotting the next consequence, or waiting for someone else's mistake to spark my next step. I just was. My life in Linden City remained the same on the surface. I woke up early, walked to the cafe on 5th and Garland, sat at the same table, ordered the same black coffee. People greeted me as Judge Hartnow, formally, respectfully, with a nod or a smile. I had earned their trust, not with charm or theatrics, but with consistency. They didn't know my past. They didn't need to. My court calendar stayed full. My chambers stayed organized. My staff remained efficient and loyal. The judicial robe no longer felt like armor, it felt like skin. Familiar. Right. Like something I had always been meant to wear, even when I was still buried in Clara's life. But inside? Inside, something had shifted. The silence that had once followed me like a shadow now felt different. Not empty. Still. Whole. I didn't check on Nathan. Not after that day. I didn't try to track where he went, whether he took the money, boarded the flight, tried to start over, or disappeared into the kind of obscurity that people like him never expected to live in. I didn't care, because his outcome was no longer my burden. Months passed. Spring softened into summer, and with it came warmth that didn't sting. I let the breeze touch my skin without flinching. I let the sun rest on my face without worrying it would burn. And then, one quiet afternoon, it arrived. No fanfare. No return address. Just a plain envelope on my desk, tucked under a case file. I opened it slowly, thinking it was another anonymous tip, or a letter from a client too shy to speak in person. But inside? Just a note. No name. No signature. Just 6 words, handwritten in slanted print. I made my decision. Thank you. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't need a name. I knew it was from him. Nathan's handwriting hadn't changed. Not even after everything. The way he curled his Y's. The space between each word. Still strangely elegant for a man who'd ruined lives with so little grace. He didn't say what his decision was. And for once, I didn't need the details. Did he cash the check? Start a new life in another country? Or did he tear it up, believing it was another test? Did he forgive himself? Did he stay broken? I would never know. And that was the point. Because the story wasn't his anymore. It was mine. For years, I had let his betrayal define me, not in weakness, but in motivation. It had been the engine that powered my transformation, the fuel that kept me climbing, burning, evolving. But now I could finally answer the question I had been afraid to ask. Who am I when I'm not seeking revenge? The answer didn't come as a flash of enlightenment. It came slowly. In the books I read on quiet Sundays. In the conversations I had with strangers who didn't know my history. In the laughter that no longer felt forced or hollow. In the mirror, when I saw Evelyn, not Clara in a costume, but me as I truly was. I started walking a different route to work. Started lingering in the courtroom after hours, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I started listening to music again. Not the kind that reminded me of what I'd lost, but the kind that helped me remember what was possible. One morning, I returned to my favorite cafe to find a flyer on the counter. A volunteer mentorship program for young law students, run by the Linden City Legal Foundation. It was small, local, underfunded, but something about it pulled at me. That night, I emailed the director. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of a group of wide-eyed students in mismatched blazers and borrowed briefcases, watching as they leaned into every word. They didn't know what I had survived. They didn't need to. All they saw was someone who had made it. Someone who had become. And I realized I had something else to offer the world now. Not vengeance. Not warning. But wisdom. That was the true new beginning. Because revenge ends. Eventually. But reinvention? That's infinite. One of the students, her name was Eliza, asked me once if I ever regretted what I had to become to get here. And I told her the truth. No, I said. But I mourn what I had to leave behind. Because healing doesn't mean pretending the wound never existed. It means carrying the scar like a story, not a shackle. I still visit the courthouse bench where I made the decision to walk away from Nathan. Not often, but sometimes. When the city is quiet and I need to remind myself of the journey. It's not about him anymore. It never really was. It's about the girl who sat in a jail cell with bruised wrists and thought her life was over. It's about the woman who walked away from the wreckage and built something sacred from the ashes. It's about the judge who speaks with calm and clarity, but who never forgot what it felt like to be voiceless. It's about Evelyn Hart. And she is just getting started.